I still remember the sound of Kyle's tiny footsteps echoing through the hallway of our old apartment. He used to call out, "Mom, look at me," just to show off a crayon drawing or a paper airplane. Back then, every little thing he did felt like a miracle. But somewhere between scraped knees and job promotions, he stopped calling for me at all. And now, I don't even get an invitation to the baby shower. Not a misunderstanding, not a scheduling conflict, just a cold 8-word text. "You're not family anymore." I gave him everything, and apparently that meant I became nothing. There are moments in life when silence hurts more than shouting. The kind of silence that falls in a kitchen when your phone screen glows with a message you never thought your own child could send. But we're not there yet, not quite. Let me tell you how we got here. My name is Dorothy Milligan. Most people just call me Dot. I turned 75 this spring, and for the first time in decades, there was no card from my son. Not even a rushed call. Just a quiet day, some warm tea, and a long, familiar ache in my chest. I spent over 40 years working as a night nurse. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and it kept a roof over our heads after my husband, Frank, passed away. Kyle was only 12. Still small enough to cry at night, big enough to hide it when I walked in. I used to leave him notes on the fridge every morning before work. "Have a good day at school, love you, leftovers in the fridge." That boy was my world. I didn't just raise him, I built his life brick by brick. When he graduated, I clapped the loudest. When he got his first job, I bought him a suit. When he met Amber, I baked 3 dozen cookies for their engagement party and stood in the back so her mother could shine more. I learned how to make myself smaller, but I never resented it. I thought that was love. Years passed. Kyle climbed the ladder at some construction firm. Amber got a real estate license. They were building their lives. Good for them. I stayed quiet and supportive, because that's what good mothers do, right? Then came the house. Amber wanted a fresh start, said the condo they were renting felt too cramped for a future. Kyle hinted, gently at first, then more firmly, that with my savings, I could help. "It's not just a house, Mom. It's where we'll raise your grandkids. You'll have your own room, a big window, no more stairs." He called it our forever home, and so I did what I always do. I helped. I pulled together every dime from my retirement savings, sold the last piece of land Frank left behind, and signed a cashier's check for $210,000. You ever write a number like that on a piece of paper? It doesn't feel real. It feels like you're giving away your soul in digits and ink. But I smiled. Because they smiled. Because I thought, this is what family is for. A few months after the closing, they moved into the new house on Ridgeway Lane. It had white shutters, a wraparound porch, and a backyard big enough for 2 golden retrievers and a child's swing set. My room was on the ground floor near the kitchen, just like Kyle promised. I planted daisies out front, bought wind chimes shaped like hummingbirds. But within weeks, my space became storage. Then a guest room. Then they gently suggested I might be more comfortable in my own place again. So I moved out, quietly, respectfully. And still, I didn't say a word. That's how I've lived most of my life. Loving people who forgot how to see me. Sometimes I think I did too good a job raising Kyle. I taught him strength and independence, but I forgot to teach him gratitude. Or maybe I taught it, and he just never wanted to learn. Amber got pregnant last year. They sent me a grainy sonogram photo in a group text. I cried when I saw it. Not just because I was happy, but because I thought maybe this was my second chance. I started knitting again. I bought a baby blanket pattern online. I embroidered the words, "Love you already, Grandma Dot." It took me 4 weeks to finish. Every stitch had hope in it. I never mailed it, not after the text I got from Kyle. "Please don't come to the baby shower. Amber thinks it's better this way. You're not family anymore." 8 words. That's all it took to erase a lifetime. And still, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't even cry. I just stared at the message until my tea turned cold. In that moment, I understood something I never had before. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was who he'd become. This is why people say every revenge story doesn't have to be loud. Some start quietly, with dignity, with a woman sitting alone in her kitchen, finally understanding that loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you forever. I gave Kyle everything I had, but I didn't give him the right to erase me. The day started with sunshine and the sound of birds near the window. I remember because I made a point to write it down in my little kitchen calendar. Saturday, see, baby shower at 2 p.m. I had ironed my blouse the night before, light blue, soft cotton. The one Kyle always said looked classy. I made lemon cookies from scratch, the kind Amber used to like, though she never admitted it out loud. The baby blanket I spent weeks knitting was folded neatly into a small white gift bag with yellow tissue paper. I'd even tied a gold ribbon around the handle. Inside the card, I wrote, "To the little one, you don't know me yet, but I already love you, Grandma Dot." Around 11 a.m., I brewed tea, sat on the couch, waited for a call or maybe a last-minute ride offer. They hadn't told me where to park. I figured they'd think of that soon enough. Then, at exactly 11:26 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from Kyle. It didn't begin with sorry or we need to talk or even hi, Mom. Just this: "Please don't come to the baby shower. Amber thinks it's better this way. You're not really family anymore." The teacup slipped slightly in my hand. I caught it before it fell. Odd the way your body reacts before your mind does. At first, I blinked, thinking maybe I misread it. Maybe he was forwarding someone else's message. Maybe it wasn't even from him, but no. It was his number, his name. His voice echoed in my head like it had when he was 5 years old and used to yell, "Mom!" from the other room. Same name, completely different person. I don't remember how long I sat there. The cookies cooled beside me. The gift bag waited patiently by the door. But me? I didn't move. No one ever thinks the door closes like that. Not loudly, not with a slam. Sometimes it just clicks. Quiet, final. I didn't write back, not immediately. What could I possibly say? You're wrong? I've paid for the house this party's being held in? That I was the one who bought the first diapers when Amber found out she was pregnant and didn't want to tell anyone yet? It wouldn't matter. So instead, I opened the curtains and looked outside. The sky was still blue. A neighbor's wind chime jingled. Somewhere in the distance, someone was mowing a lawn. And across town, my son and his wife were decorating a nursery I'd never see. You know, I used to think pain came in big moments. Hospital rooms, funerals, breakups. But this was a new kind of grief. A quiet one. A grief you wear like a shawl. Light but constant, always there. I picked up the phone and typed, "I understand. I wish you a beautiful day. Please give the baby my love." And that was it. He didn't reply. Hours passed. I heard nothing. And sometime around 3 p.m., I glanced at my wall clock and imagined the baby shower was in full swing. Maybe someone was making a toast. Maybe Amber's mother was showing ultrasound pictures. Maybe someone was laughing about the old woman who wasn't there. And maybe no one noticed at all. It's strange, isn't it? How you can build a life for someone piece by piece and still be treated like you were never there to begin with. That's what hurt the most. Not the party or the exclusion, but the erasure. I wasn't just unwanted, I was unacknowledged. If you've ever felt that way, like someone you loved erased your name from the guest list of their life, you're not alone. And if this moment stirs something in you, feel free to share your own story below. Maybe someone else needs to hear it too. I took the gift bag and placed it gently on the kitchen table. The card, the blanket, the cookies, they all look so small now, like offerings to someone who never planned to open the door. I stood there for a long time. Then I did something that surprised even me. I opened the bag, pulled out the blanket, and placed it over the back of my reading chair. I wasn't going to let it sit in a box for someone who didn't want it. It was still made with love. And I could still love, just differently. That evening, Clare called. Clare is Kyle's daughter from a previous relationship. She's 17 now, thoughtful in ways her father never quite managed to be. "Grandma," she said, "are you going to the shower?" There was a pause. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "I think it's best if I stay home." She didn't ask why, but I heard the sadness in her silence. "Can I come by tomorrow?" she asked softly. "Of course." And that was it. No begging, no explaining, just a granddaughter's voice reminding me that not all love disappears, not all family forgets. As the sun set, I took a slow walk down the block. My neighbors waved. Someone's sprinkler was still on. The world, it seemed, had no idea I'd been cast out of someone else's definition of family. But I knew. And for the first time, I also knew I wouldn't be walking back into it. Not because I was angry, but because I was finally done trying to earn a place I had already paid for. There's a kind of quiet that sinks into the walls after disappointment. Not the peaceful kind, like after a rainstorm, but the heavy, hollow kind. The kind that wraps around you like a wet coat and stays, no matter how many lights you turn on. That was the kind of quiet that filled my house after Kyle's message. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't reach for music. I didn't even touch the lemon cookies, still sitting on the tray, their sugar slowly crystallizing in the air. Instead, I sat by the window, still in the blouse I had ironed for the baby shower, and watched as the day passed by like it had nothing to answer for. Around 4:15, I walked to the dining table where I'd left the gift bag. I stared at it for a while. Gold ribbon still perfect, card untouched, tissue paper fluffed like it was waiting for applause. Then I slowly opened the bag and took out the baby blanket. It was soft, white with pale blue edging, each stitch small and deliberate. I had added tiny embroidered stars across the bottom corner. I had meant it to be the first thing that touched my grandchild's skin. Now I wasn't sure it would ever leave this house. I folded it and laid it gently over the back of my reading chair. The gift bag I slid into the trash. Not out of anger, just finality. Some things don't need to sit around gathering dust, pretending they still serve a purpose. That night, I tried to sleep, but the silence only got louder. I laid awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying old conversations. Kyle as a boy, as a teenager, as a grown man. Every thank you that never came. Every visit that felt more like an obligation than a choice. At some point after midnight, I gave up. I got out of bed, made tea, and sat down at the kitchen table with the manila folder I kept in the bottom drawer, the one labeled House Ridgeway Lane. Inside were copies of the purchase agreement, the wire transfer confirmation, the escrow documents, $210,000, paid in full from my retirement and savings. No loan, no mortgage, just me. The title was in Kyle's name. My name wasn't on anything but the cashier's check. Still, I had asked for one thing, a written clause that if I no longer lived there and had not been treated as family, I would retain a contingent right of reversal after 5 years. A detail Kyle signed without reading, distracted by the kitchen contractor that day. I didn't want to use it. I never thought I'd need to. I just wanted to feel like I still had a sliver of safety, like the years of giving hadn't made me powerless. As I ran my fingers over the papers, I realized something. The hurt wasn't just from the exclusion, but the ease with which it had been delivered. 8 words, no hesitation, no second thought. You're not really family anymore. It wasn't even angry, it was just casual. Like canceling a dinner reservation. I think that's what broke me more than anything. I decided to go for a drive the next day. Not far, just across town. I passed the house on Ridgeway Lane. White shutters, new mulch in the flower beds, 2 balloons still bobbing on the mailbox. It's a boy, in silver foil. I pulled over across the street. Through the window I could see people inside. Laughter. Decorations, a banner that said "Welcome Baby," and not a single thought spared for the woman who made that welcome possible. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't need to. I just sat there for a few minutes, watching them move around in my gift, in my house, in a life I had built and been erased from. Then I drove away. On the way home, I stopped at the grocery store, walked down the cereal aisle, picked up oat milk even though I wasn't out yet. I just needed to move. To feel normal. At the checkout line, the clerk smiled at me. "Big plans today?" she asked. I looked down at my basket. Oat milk, bananas, a frozen dinner. "No," I said softly, "just adjusting some expectations." She gave me a kind look. I don't think she knew what I meant, But that was okay. I didn't need the world to understand. I just needed to start understanding myself. That night, I opened a blank page in my notebook and wrote 3 words in capital letters. No more chasing. Not love, not approval, not my place in someone else's story. I'm not sure when it started, this habit of shrinking myself so others could shine, of staying quiet so no one else felt uncomfortable. But I knew it ended here. It's hard to admit, especially as a mother, that your child sees you as background noise, a supporting role, a financial safety net. But pretending otherwise doesn't make it less true. The next morning, I made an appointment with my lawyer, and just like that, the first quiet step toward taking my life back had begun. I didn't cry. That surprised me. After everything, after the message, after the party, after watching them laugh inside the house I bought, I still didn't cry. Not even when I pulled out the old photo albums. I sat at the kitchen table with the blinds drawn, flipping slowly through pages that smelled like thyme and dust. There was Kyle at 5, missing his front teeth, hugging a stuffed giraffe. Kyle at 10, holding a fish he caught on a weekend trip I scraped money together to give him. Kyle at 16, in that crooked tie I ironed 3 times the morning of his school dance. I didn't cry. I just sat there with the blanket of silence wrapped tight around me, the kind that doesn't comfort. It suffocates. There's a special kind of collapse no one talks about. It doesn't come with slamming doors or loud heartbreak. It's quiet. It happens slowly, privately, and you don't even realize it's begun until you catch yourself staring at nothing, realizing hours have passed. That was me. I didn't eat much that week. The groceries stayed in their bags longer than they should have. I reheated the same bowl of soup 3 nights in a row and still didn't finish it. The house felt colder, or maybe I just stopped turning the heat on. I avoided mirrors. I wasn't sure I'd recognize the woman in them. Because here's the truth. You see, amigas, when you've spent your whole life giving, to your child, to your family, to your job, you forget how to exist when there's no one left to pour yourself into. I had poured everything into Kyle. Every hour, every dollar, every bit of energy I had left after the night shifts and overtime and skipped vacations. And now, there was no space left for me. One night, around 1 a.m., I pulled the old storage box from my closet, the one marked legal. Inside were files, some from Frank's estate, others from the hospital where I worked, but most were papers I had kept just in case. I found the original deed, my handwriting on a sticky note that said, "Keep a copy, just in case the world forgets you." I stared at that note for a long time. It hit me then. A part of me had always known this was possible, that someday all my love, my giving, my effort might not be enough. That scared me more than the rejection itself, because it meant I saw this coming and still chose to love blindly. The next morning, I walked outside and stood on my porch with a mug of cold coffee in my hands. The neighbor's dog barked at nothing. A few crows circled overhead. I felt like I wasn't in my life anymore, just watching it from a distance. When Clare came by that afternoon, I didn't open the door right away. I sat there just behind the curtain, wondering if I could pretend not to be home. But her voice was soft. "Grandma? I brought something." I opened the door and saw her holding a little bouquet, daisies and lavender, from the farmer's market probably. "I just thought these might cheer you up." I nodded, took the flowers and let her in. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't mention the party. She just sat with me, drinking lukewarm tea and talking about school and how she'd started writing poetry. Then she said something that lodged in my heart like a pebble in a shoe. "Dad thinks you're too emotional, but I think that's what made you such a good mom." I didn't respond right away. My voice wasn't working properly just then. But I squeezed her hand, and for the first time all week, I felt a breath come easier. That night, when the house was quiet again, I walked to the chair where I'd placed the baby blanket. I picked it up, held it against my chest, and that's when the tears came. Not loud, not heavy, just soft, slow, and steady. They weren't for Kyle. They weren't even for the baby I wouldn't meet. They were for me. For the woman I used to be. the one who thought love guaranteed safety, for the hours I gave without complaint, for the dignity I allowed to be chipped away piece by piece in the name of keeping peace. That collapse? It didn't look like a storm. It looked like a woman sitting in her quiet living room, clutching a handmade blanket, finally letting herself feel everything she had been holding in. People think heartbreak is loud, but mine was quiet. It happened in skipped meals and unopened curtains, in a house filled with framed pictures of a family that no longer remembered who took those pictures. It happened in slow motion. Too slow for anyone else to notice. But I noticed. And even though I wasn't ready yet, something in me whispered, "This isn't the end." It started with a photograph. One of those old Polaroids, a little faded, edges curling. I found it while digging through a drawer I hadn't opened in years. Just looking for batteries, really. But what I found instead stopped me cold. It was Kyle, maybe 7 or 8, standing on top of a step stool in our tiny kitchen, stirring brownie batter with both hands like it was rocket science. There was flour in his hair, chocolate smudged on his nose, and that little gap-toothed grin that used to melt me every single time. On the back, in my handwriting, Kyle's first time baking, Mother's Day surprise. I held that photo in my hands for a long time. Funny how something that small can hit harder than any argument. It took me back to every scraped knee I bandaged, every spelling test we practiced, every 3 a.m. fever I soothed with cold towels and whispered lullabies. To nights I worked double shifts and came home just in time to kiss his forehead before school. They forgot. Amber, of course, never knew any of it. And Kyle? Kyle forgot. That realization didn't come with bitterness this time, just sadness, because you can't forget something you truly carried in your heart, and clearly, they hadn't been carrying me. That week, I started gathering the memories for myself, not for revenge, not to prove anything, but because I refused to be erased. I opened the old cedar chest in the guest room. Inside were years of life, cards Kyle made in elementary school, a macaroni necklace, concert programs, a worn-out stuffed bear with one eye missing. I laid them out on the floor like pieces of a broken puzzle. My life's work spread across hardwood like a museum of unnoticed devotion. I made tea, sat down, and I started writing. Not a letter to Kyle, not a list of complaints, a timeline, not dates and events, but feelings. What it felt like when he called me Mama for the first time. What it felt like when he cried the day his dad died. What it felt like when he came home from college and asked me to cook his favorite stew because nothing tastes like yours, Mom. Page after page, I wrote them out. Not to give away, to keep. Because if they weren't going to remember what I gave, then I would. One afternoon, Claire came over again. She brought soup and a new journal. Said she thought maybe I'd want to write something real. I showed her the pages. At first, she just glanced. Then she started reading, and she cried. "Grandma," she whispered, "I didn't know he was like that with you. Not when he was little." "He was," I said softly. "And that's what makes this hurt more." We sat there in silence, 2 generations of women, one realizing how much had been lost, and the other just starting to understand how much had been given. Later that night, I looked around the living room. It still looked the same, neat, warm, quiet, but something had changed. Me. I no longer needed them to remember me. I no longer needed to be invited or thanked or hugged at holidays. I had remembered myself. And once you remember your worth, you can't unsee it. I didn't reach out to Kyle, not even when Claire told me the baby had arrived. A boy, 7 pounds, 9 ounces, named Tyler after Amber's brother. I smiled politely. I didn't send a gift. I didn't ask for photos. They had made it clear I wasn't part of the story. And for the first time in my life, I didn't ache to be. That weekend, I went to a garage sale 2 towns over. There was a dusty typewriter for $10. I bought it. Not because I needed it, but because it reminded me that stories are worth recording, especially the ones that no one else bothers to tell. I began typing up my timeline, clean pages, clear words, not angry, not bitter, just real. because this was no longer about what I had lost. It was about what I had carried. There's something sacred in reclaiming your story. When people erase your name from invitations, from photos, from the seat at the table, you don't fight for the seat. You build your own table. I may not have a place in Kyle's house, but I have a place in my own life. That's more than enough. It was a Tuesday. Not a holiday, not an anniversary. Just a regular, unremarkable Tuesday in April. And yet, I remember it clearly. Because it was the day I stopped waiting for an apology that was never going to come. I had just come in from watering the garden. Spring had finally arrived in Tennessee, and the daffodils I planted last fall were blooming like they had something to prove. I stood there for a moment, dirt still on my gloves, watching the sunlight hit the petals just right. Then my phone buzzed on the kitchen table. It was a text from Clare. After all this time, I wish I could say my heart jumped, that I smiled, that hope bloomed as bright as those daffodils. But I just stared at the screen, empty, because by now, I knew better. Hope you're well. Baby's here. Just busy. Thanks for understanding. No picture, no name, not even a "Love Kyle." Just a cold line that sounded more like a bank notification than a message from my own son. I put the phone down. And that's when it happened. Not a breakdown, not anger, just stillness. A deep, quiet clarity. I made myself tea, lavender chamomile, and sat by the window in my reading chair where the baby blanket still hung, untouched. And I said it out loud this time, not to Kyle, not to Amber, but to myself. I'm done. Done holding space in my heart for people who had locked me out of theirs. Done offering love where it was met with silence. Done waiting by a phone that rang only when something was needed. And just like that, I let go. Letting go isn't something you do once. It's something you do every day, a little at a time. You stop checking their social media. You stop hoping they'll remember your birthday. You stop knitting things they'll never unwrap. You reclaim time, energy, dignity. That day, I packed a small box, not with bitterness, but with release. Inside, I placed the baby blanket, a copy of the $210,000 wire confirmation, the family photos from Ridgeway Lane, and a short letter, handwritten in my best cursive. I gave what I could. I loved as best I knew how. And now I give you freedom. From me and from what you never valued. I didn't mail it. I didn't need to. The act of boxing it up was enough. It wasn't for them. It was for me. That afternoon, I walked to the mailbox and sent something else instead. A notarized letter to my lawyer, activating the clause in the Ridgeway Lane deed, the right of reversal. It had been 5 years. Quietly, respectfully, I had kept my end of the agreement. They had not. And now, the house was no longer theirs. I didn't do it out of revenge, not to get even, not to teach a lesson. I did it because I deserved closure, because I needed to stop bleeding into people who never noticed the wound. That evening, I sat down with Clare again. She asked if I was okay. I looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "I think I finally am." She smiled gently. "You seem lighter." "I feel lighter," I said. We ate soup and played cards. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Not a forced chuckle, but a real one, from deep in my gut. And now, dear listener, maybe this part of my story feels familiar to you. Maybe you've been sitting at your own version of that window, holding space in your heart for someone who keeps shutting the door. If so, I just want to say something. You don't need their permission to reclaim your worth. If you've ever had to let go of someone you raised, someone you loved, someone who forgot you existed, share your story below. You never know who else you might help feel less invisible. That night, I slept soundly. No dreams, no memories clawing at the edges, just peace. The kind that comes when you finally step out of the waiting room and walk into your own life again. The gift sat quietly on the shelf in my hallway closet, still wrapped, still untouched. It had been there for months now, tucked behind a box of winter scarves and an old lamp I meant to fix years ago. Blue ribbon, white paper, a card taped to the front that simply said, "To Baby W, with all my love, Grandma." Except no one ever called me that. Not once. No baby books with Grandma Dorothy written inside. No thank you message, no visit, just silence. I took it down that morning, dusted it off, and sat with it in my lap. It was heavier than I remembered, not because of what was inside, but because of what it used to represent. Hope. A future where maybe, just maybe, I'd still have a place in their world. But that hope had faded now. Not in anger, not even sadness, really. Just reality. You can't force your way into someone's life if they've already locked the door from the inside. And Kyle? He'd built an entire new house and never even bothered to leave me a key. I didn't cry. I think my tears had run dry weeks ago. Instead, I ran my fingers over the smooth edges of the paper and tried to remember what I had packed inside. A handmade baby quilt. Books I had read to Kyle when he was small. Where the Wild Things Are, Goodnight Moon, a silver rattle I found at a vintage shop and polished until it shone. All chosen with love. All meant to carry the warmth of a grandmother's hands. But it had just sat there. Unclaimed, unwanted, forgotten. That afternoon, Claire came by with 2 paper cups of coffee and a cinnamon bun. We split right down the middle. "Have you talked to Dad?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "Don't plan to," I said. "I sent my last gift months ago. It never got opened." Claire looked at me, understanding. Her eyes softened. She reached for the gift on the table and asked, "Can I open it?" I hesitated, then nodded. She untied the ribbon slowly, like it was something sacred. When she pulled back the paper and saw the quilt, she gasped, "Grandma, this is beautiful. You made this?" I nodded again, a lump forming in my throat. She held it up to the light and then wrapped it around her own shoulders. "He may have forgotten," she said, "but I won't." That night, I finally made space in the guest room closet, took down some old boxes, placed the quilt in a clean cedar drawer, not to give away, but to keep, for someone who will one day understand what it means to be loved quietly. You see, I used to think giving was about being received, that love only counted if someone acknowledged it. But now, I see it differently. Giving is its own kind of power, even if it's ignored, even if it goes unopened, because the act of loving well changes you. It makes you softer in some places and stronger in others. It teaches you that the value of your love isn't measured by how people treat it, but by how it shaped you in the giving. And that was the day I redefined what legacy means. Not the kind you pass through a will or a deed or a gift bag with a bow, but the kind you pass through stories, through warmth, through survival, through remembering. The next morning, I began organizing the house, not out of sadness, but intention. I pulled out journals, labeled photographs, wrote little notes, and tucked them into cookbooks and drawers, not for Kyle, but for Clare. For whoever would one day open them and see the woman who once lived here, not the woman Kyle forgot, but the woman who remembered everything and still loved anyway. There's a quiet nobility in choosing to matter to yourself. I no longer needed the title of grandmother to know I had something to give. And I didn't need their invitations to feel like my life was full. That unopened gift, it used to symbolize rejection. Now it represents clarity. I gave my love freely. They chose not to open it. That's not on me. And friend, if you've ever felt like your best efforts, your most heartfelt gifts, have gone unnoticed, let me tell you, they still matter, because they came from a place in you that no one else can erase. Have you ever given love that was never returned? Tell me in the comments. Your story might help someone else feel seen today. As I made myself a cup of tea and curled up in my reading chair that night, I glanced once more at the empty box now resting by the door. It wasn't sad anymore. It was just done. There's a kind of silence that happens just before something changes. Not a loud crash, not a storm, just stillness. And that's exactly what it felt like the day I sat across from Mr. Harmon, my lawyer of 31 years, and slid the Ridgeway Lane file back across his desk. "I'm ready," I said. He looked up from his glasses, slow and careful. You understand this will officially transfer the property title back to you? I do. He didn't question it. Didn't ask if Kyle knew. He just nodded. Because he'd seen women like me before. Women who gave too much, waited too long, and eventually found their strength again in the quietest ways. That house was more than wood and drywall. It was a promise I had made with my own hands, a foundation built on sacrifices I never kept track of. Every brick meant something. Kyle hadn't just ignored me. He had taken that promise, dressed it up in entitlement, and handed the keys to someone who never even looked me in the eye. So yes, I took it back. Not out of spite, but because it had never truly belonged to them. The notice was delivered that Friday. I didn't want drama. I didn't want to see his face. I didn't even want to hear his voice explain or justify or blame. So I had it sent by courier. Clean, legal, quiet. Per Clause 4B in the conditional deed, title to the property at 112 Ridgeway Lane is hereby reversed to the original grantor, Dorothy Hale, effective immediately. I stood at my kitchen window that morning, coffee in hand, staring at the mailbox, knowing full well what was arriving at their doorstep. I imagined Amber opening it first, the way her lips would tighten, the confusion, the disbelief, then Kyle reading it, maybe even laughing at first, thinking it was some clerical error. But eventually, reality would settle in. That house, the one he told me I'd never be welcome in again, wasn't his anymore. By Saturday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text. Kyle, what the hell is this? Are you serious? I stared at it for a moment, then hit delete. No reply. Then another text. You can't just take the house. We have a baby now. And for the first time in months, I felt something new in my chest. Not guilt, not regret. Relief. Because I finally knew I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. They had removed me from their lives without hesitation. From birthdays, from photos, from the title of mom. But I hadn't removed myself. Now I had. Not to hurt them, but to make peace with myself. I walked into my small office later that day and pulled out the letter I had written weeks ago, the one I thought I'd never send, a final letter to Kyle. But I didn't mail it. Instead, I opened a new envelope, wrote just one line, and sealed it shut. This is what boundaries look like. I dropped it in the mailbox that evening, and as the lid closed, I felt light. On Monday, I received an email from my realtor. She had quietly listed the Ridgeway house just as we'd discussed. She attached staging photos, clean, bright, with a vase of sunflowers in the kitchen window. It looked nothing like it did when Kyle lived there. It looked peaceful. I didn't ask where Kyle and Amber went. I didn't want to know. What mattered was that I had taken something back. Not just the house, but the years I let myself be invisible. The years I allowed love to mean being erased. The years I thought being a good mother meant tolerating pain without protest. No more. Claire came over a few days later with homemade cookies. She poured us tea and asked, "Do you feel guilty?" I smiled. Not one bit. She grinned, a little mischievously. Good. Then she said something I'll never forget. You didn't take the house back, Grandma. You just stopped giving it to people who didn't deserve it. And that was the truth. Because what I reclaimed wasn't just property. I reclaimed my value, my voice, my space. And you know what's funny? The world didn't fall apart. No one came banging on my door. No angry relatives, no shame-filled calls. Just the sound of birds outside. And the soft hum of peace settling back into my bones. We often think that reclaiming something means confrontation, but sometimes it's just an act of clarity, a quiet signature, a closed envelope, a set of keys dropped into the right hands. That's what this was. It wasn't revenge. It was return to dignity, return to balance, return to myself. It was Thanksgiving morning and the house was quiet, the kind of quiet that wraps around you, not lonely, just still. I had set the table for 3, not out of habit, out of intention. 1 plate for me, 1 for Claire, and 1 chair left empty. The chair across from mine had always been Kyle's spot, As a little boy, he'd swing his legs beneath it, knocking over napkins and laughing with his mouth full. As a teen, he'd sulk into the mashed potatoes, arms crossed, too cool to be grateful. And later, when he brought Amber around, they'd sit close, whispering and giggling while I basted the turkey. But this year, I didn't expect him to walk through the door, didn't leave the porch light on, didn't check my phone. And still, I set his chair. Not for him, for me. So I could look at that empty space and say, "You're not here, and I'm okay." Claire arrived with cranberry sauce and a crooked pumpkin pie. She noticed the chair right away. "You sure about this?" she asked. I nodded. "I need to see the space he left. And no, it doesn't control me anymore." She didn't push, just squeezed my hand and said, "Okay." We ate. We laughed. She told me about a new boy she'd met, works at the bookstore, smells like cedar and chai. And I told her about a new soup recipe I was thinking of trying, and all the while the chair stayed empty. Not a wound, not a weapon, just truth. Later that afternoon, I made tea and sat by the window while Claire napped in the den. The sun filtered in, golden and soft, catching dust motes in the air like fireflies. And I thought about all the holidays I had poured myself into, all the traditions I had created to keep Kyle's childhood safe and warm, all the meals I made with tired feet and an aching back, all the gifts I wrapped with shaky hands in the cold night just to see him smile. And now, he didn't remember the way my gravy tasted, didn't ask for my recipes, didn't even send a text. There's something humbling about realizing you were only ever holding up a relationship by yourself. But there's also something freeing, because once you see that, you stop begging for balance. You stop reaching toward a chair that's never going to be filled again. I walked back to the table before clearing up, looked at Kyle's chair, and I whispered, almost like a prayer, "I release you." Not with bitterness, not to erase him, but to reclaim myself. The next day, I boxed up some of his things I had held onto for too long, a high school trophy, a faded flannel shirt, a photo from our trip to Oregon. I didn't burn them, I didn't throw them away, I just put them in the attic, because I no longer needed them in my daily life. What I needed was space. You see, empty chairs don't have to be symbols of failure. Sometimes they're reminders of boundaries. They say, "This is where you used to sit, and now I sit differently." And maybe you, listening right now, have an empty chair in your life too, a place where someone used to be, child, partner, sibling, friend. If so, I want to say this, that space doesn't define you. You do. Have you ever set the table and stared at the space someone left behind? Share your moment below. You never know who might read it and feel a little less alone today. That Sunday, Claire helped me move the chair to the garage. "I can take it to Goodwill if you want," she offered. I thought about it, then smiled. "No, I think I'll paint it instead. Maybe put it in the garden." She laughed. "You're wild." "I'm evolving," I said. Because healing doesn't always look like a dramatic speech or a grand act. Sometimes it's just moving a chair, reclaiming a room, letting the light come in where the shadows used to live. That chair is still with me, now painted soft blue, now holding potted herbs out by the porch, still useful, still present, but no longer holding a ghost. It had been almost a year since Kyle stopped calling me Mom. I don't know when the shift happened, whether it was gradual or whether one day, like a door shutting, he just chose another word, or no word at all. But I remember the last letter I wrote to him, and the fact that I never mailed it. It sat in my desk drawer underneath my utility bills and an old birthday card from Clare. A simple white envelope, thick from the weight of too much emotion folded inside. I found it while I was clearing space, something I did often now. Not out of sadness, but ritual. Like making space in your home makes space in your heart. I picked it up. The handwriting was still firm. "Kyle, in case you ever wondered." I sat down, tea in hand, and read my own words. Somehow they hit me differently now, not sharper, just clearer. "Kyle, I used to believe that love meant staying silent. I believed in enduring things. I believed deeply that a good mother never put herself first. You made it clear I was no longer welcome in your life. I wasn't invited. I wasn't acknowledged. And still, I tried to explain, tried to find the missing pieces that might fix us. But now, I've stopped looking. I see it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. The letter was raw. Not cruel, but honest. And for a long time, I had been afraid that honesty would make me less of a mother. Now I understood. It made me more of a person. I gave you a childhood I never had. I sacrificed things you never saw. And maybe that was my mistake. Thinking you would know, thinking you would care. But I'm not writing this to guilt you. I'm writing this because I finally love myself enough to say, I was a good mother. Even if you never say it back. I folded the letter back in half and just held it for a while. A strange calmness came over me. Not closure, because I never liked that word, but recognition. This wasn't a letter I needed to send. It had already served its purpose. It helped me realize that my worth as a mother, as a woman, didn't begin or end with my son's approval. It existed before him, and it would continue after him. I slipped the letter into a small wooden box with a brass latch. The same box where I kept Claire's childhood drawings, a few old photographs, and the only love note I ever received from her father. I wasn't hiding the letter. I just didn't need it out anymore. You know, people say healing is loud, screaming, crying, breakthroughs. But real healing? It's quiet. It happens when no one is looking. It's you, sitting alone with a cup of tea, choosing not to chase the person who walked away. Later that week, I told Clare about the letter. Do you wish you had sent it? She asked. No, I said. I needed to write it more than he needed to read it. There was peace in that. Not power, not revenge, just peace. The kind that comes when you stop needing someone else to validate the life you lived. Kyle may never read those words. He may never ask what I went through or wonder how I felt during all the Thanksgivings I spent with a table set for someone who never showed. But I know, and that's enough. I lit a candle that evening and placed it next to the wooden box, not as a shrine, but as a reminder that even in silence, even in absence, I am whole. I hadn't seen the deed papers in over 5 years. They were tucked into a green file folder, buried in my bedroom filing cabinet under utility bills, warranties, and insurance records that hadn't seen daylight since 2003. And yet, one quiet morning, just after a gentle rain and a black coffee that tasted unusually strong, I pulled them out. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to remind myself. Her name was on the papers too, mine. When Kyle and I first closed on that house, he wasn't even 30 yet. He didn't have the credit, didn't have the down payment, but I believed in him. So I added my name to the title. I wrote the first checks. I even paid the contractor directly when the front porch started sagging before the baby arrived. Every nail, every roof tile, every mortgage payment that came in a month too short, it came through me. But somewhere along the way, maybe when Amber moved in, maybe when the baby came, or maybe the moment I stopped saying yes to every ask, my name faded from his memory. They acted like I was a guest in that house, like I was lucky to be let in, let alone offered a cup of tea. They said I didn't fit their lifestyle. Kyle once joked at a dinner, half laughing, half cruel, Mom still thinks it's her house. He was wrong. I didn't think it was mine. I knew it was. That day, holding those crisp legal papers in my hands, I realized something. He hadn't taken anything from me. I had given too much away, and now I was simply reclaiming it. The part that stung? It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about square footage or who got the master bedroom. It was about being erased. Like the years I spent cleaning up scraped knees and broken hearts had disappeared into drywall. Like love, when forgotten, suddenly stopped existing. I took the deed down to the notary that afternoon. No drama, no announcement. Just one quiet form, one steady signature, and the final stamp that said, I'm not invisible. I was never invisible. Claire met me for dinner that night. We sat in a cozy booth near the window at that little cafe that still had real linen napkins. "I saw the new listing," she said, almost cautiously. "It says family home, well cared for." I smiled. It was, even if no one remembers how. She hesitated, then added, "You're still on the papers, aren't you?" I nodded. "Good," she said. "You were always on the papers." It's funny how women like me, mothers, caretakers, homemakers, are always signing things. School forms, loan applications, birthday cards. Checks we're not supposed to talk about. But the one thing we forget to sign, our own names on our worth. That night, I took the deed and placed it in the box next to the letter I never sent. Not because I needed proof, but because someday, someone will open that box. Maybe Claire. Maybe a granddaughter I haven't met yet. And she'll see it. She'll see that her grandmother's name was there all along. We talk so much about legacy in big, loud ways, money, wills, inheritances. But maybe the real legacy is smaller, quieter, a line on a page, a woman remembering her own name, a whisper that says, "You mattered." Even when they tried to forget you, there are no more papers to sign now. No more favors to lend, no more dinners where I sit quietly while someone else speaks over me. I don't need Kyle to remember what I gave. I remember. And for once, that's enough. The last time I heard from Kyle, it was a short email. No subject line, no apology, just, "We saw the house went up for sale. I hope you're okay." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, because I wasn't. But because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been lived. By then, I was already in the new place. It wasn't big, just a one-story brick cottage with creaky floors and a screened-in porch that caught the morning light like a secret. No memories clung to the corners, no ghosts of past holidays whispered through the walls, just space and air and silence, the kind of silence that finally feels earned. I planted lavender by the window and let the scent fill the kitchen. Hung Clare's painting in the hallway. Framed one of my old photographs, me, in my 30s, on a road trip, smiling with wind-tangled hair. That woman had been lost for a while. Now she lived here again. There was no dramatic finale, no grand reckoning. Kyle didn't show up on my doorstep. Amber didn't send a message asking for forgiveness. There were no tearful confessions, no warm reconciliations, and honestly, I'm glad, because this story was never about them. It was always about the quiet return to myself. One Sunday, Claire and I sat outside with iced tea. The wind was soft and smelled like early summer. She asked, "Do you ever miss it? The old house?" I looked out at the garden, where the blue-painted chair now held a pot of basil and lemon balm. "No," I said. "I don't miss the house. I miss what I thought it meant." Claire nodded. She understood. Sometimes we miss the idea more than the thing itself. I still keep the letter in the wooden box, still glance at the deed papers once in a while, not to revisit the pain, but to remind myself how far I've walked. Because peace doesn't arrive like a gift. It's built, brick by brick, in the boundaries we draw, in the words we choose not to send, in the chairs we move to the garden. I go for long walks now. I cook for one without sadness. I say no without guilt. I say yes to things I never thought I was allowed to want. Some days I look in the mirror and see the same wrinkles Kyle once said made me look tired. And I smile, because I earned every line. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with applause or closure. It comes like breath. And when it finally settles in your chest, you'll know. You'll stop rehearsing the arguments you never got to have. You'll stop writing speeches in your head. You'll stop waiting to be invited back into rooms you built but were locked out of. I still love my son. That never changed. But I love myself more now, and that changed everything. If you're still here reading this far, maybe you're walking through your own version of silence. Maybe someone closed the door on you. Maybe you were erased from a life you helped build. Maybe your name was never spoken again. If so, I want to tell you, you still matter. You were never an invisible. You don't need their recognition to prove what you gave. If this resonated with you, share one word below to describe your current peace journey. Just one word. Your voice might help someone else feel less alone.